Chapter 207. The Lord to the End of Creation. After the evening meal, Joseph blessed all the guests, and the little child also blessed them and said, "Now all of you go to your rest, and do not be afraid if during the night a little storm will thrust against our house. For no one will be harmed in the least. Remember, he who here dwells among you is also a lord of the storms." After these words, which aroused concern for the ship among the ship's company of Cyrenius, a sailor asserted, "This child is a regular prophet, for he foretells serious trouble. Therefore we should immediately go to where the ship of Cyrenius is loosely tied, pull it into the shore as close as possible, and then make it fast." Here Jonathan arose and stated, "Do not worry. In the first place, the Lord will surely know how to protect the ship. And in the second place, I also have people at home who know more about making a ship fast than you, and will surely know how to make the governor's ship fast. So you can be quite unconcerned along with me." These words put everyone at ease, and they retired. Mary promptly made a very soft and fresh bed for the little child, then laid him down and placed the little bed beside her sleeping couch. Now Mary and Eudokia usually slept together in one bed, as they did now. But Eudokia, who was thoroughly afraid of the predicted storm, confessed to Mary, "Mary, see, I have a strong fear of the without doubt approaching storm. How would it be if today we took the little child in the middle between us? Then we would surely be safe from every danger." And the little child, upon thus hearing Eudokia express her concern, smiled and said, "Oh, Eudokia, sometimes you are right smart, but other times a real simpleton. Do you really suppose that I can only protect you when I am on your lap? Oh, there you are in great error. See, my arm is longer than you suppose. And if you were at the end of creation, I still would be able to protect you there as well as here. So just be calm and go to rest as usual, and tomorrow you will arise once more in good health." This put Eudokia at ease, and she promptly went to rest along with Mary. Chapter 208. Joseph puts a curse on the storm. 2 hours later, when everyone was already at rest, a very powerful gale came and thrust against the house so violently that the entire house shook. All the sleepers were awakened by this resounding blow. And since the gale continued to rage and was accompanied by 1,000 lightnings and the most intense thunder, all those who were present in Joseph's house began to quake and to quiver thereat. To the fury and raging of the gale, there was also added the howling of a multitude of wild, rending animals, which added to the fear of the guests in Joseph's house. Everyone now began to press into the chamber where Joseph, Cyrenius, and Jonathan were, and sought protection there. Hereupon Joseph arose, made a light, and consoled the faint-hearted as well as he could. And the same was done by the gigantic Jonathan, and by Cyrenius. But since the storm constantly became more violent, the consoling of the three did not have much effect. And what especially caused the greatest fear of death among most of those present was that a few tigers, amid most unearthly howls, began to thrust their paws inside through the barred-up windows. When the storm became too fierce even for Joseph, he became aroused and shouted at it, "Be silent, you monster, in the name of him who dwells here, the Lord of infinity, and henceforth never disturb those who need rest during the night. So be it." These words Joseph shouted with such force that all were more terrified thereat than at the raging gale. But the storm just would not cease, whereat Joseph became still more aroused and directed his threat at the storm with still greater force. But this also remained fruitless, and the gale mocked Joseph. Here Joseph became angry at the disobedient gale and put a curse on it. At this moment, the little child awakened and said to James, who was present beside the little bed, "James, go in to Joseph and tell him to recall his curse, for he does not know what he curses. Tomorrow he will understand the reason for this storm and discover its good purpose. In a few minutes it will come to an end anyhow." Thereupon James promptly went to Joseph and told him what the little child had instructed him to say. Here Joseph took heart and did what James told him, and soon thereafter the storm subsided. The beasts dispersed, and everyone in Joseph's house went back to rest. Chapter 209. The Reason for the Storm. The following day, Joseph arose very early, as usual, and apportioned the daily tasks to his 4 sons, whose first task it was to provide for a good breakfast, and then to perform whatever duties needed to be done. After attending to this, he went outside to see what damage the storm might have caused during the night. And as he thus walked back and forth, he soon found a mass of gnawed-off human bones, and found many places that were stained with human blood. This sight greatly surprised him, and he could not solve this riddle. And as he went onward, he also found a mass of daggers and small lances that were frequently stained with blood. At this he began to see matters in quite a different light, and slowly began to understand the beneficial reason for the gale and for the wild animals that were brought there because of it. After breakfast, Joseph led Cyrenius and Jonathan outside and showed them the strange find of the morning. When Cyrenius beheld this, he struck his hands together above his head and declared, "But in the name of the Almighty Lord, just what is that? From whence are these bones of the dead? From whence these weapons still dripping with fresh blood? Joseph, brother, friend, have you no idea as to the cause of this abomination?" And Joseph answered, "Friend and brother, those are either sea pirates or the assassins that pursued your ship. But let us first destroy all of that with fire, and then we will attempt to get to the bottom of the matter." Cyrenius was satisfied with this, and all his household servants were sent to gather in wood from all sides. And when toward noon a very large pile of wood had been stacked up in an open place, the bones as well as the weapons were laid on the great mound of wood, and thus burned up. Chapter 210. The child foretells a fire from above. After several hours, everything was burned up, and nothing was noticed by any of the guests, since the Lord wanted it that way, and no one else knew anything about it except the servants of Cyrenius. Only then did Tullia, Moronius Pillar, and the chief officers and centurions, along with Mary and with James, who led the little child, come out of the house into the open for the first time this day. Now Moronius Pillar, whose sense of smell was very keen, immediately noticed an odour of burning, went directly to Joseph and inquired, "Most noble friend, do you not notice an odour of a wild conflagration in your nostrils?" Here Joseph led him somewhat aside, behind the house, and with his finger pointed out the scene of the fire to him. And Moronius asked just what had been delivered up to the fire there. Joseph answered, "Friend, that is just why the matter was delivered up to the fire, so it should not catch the eyes of the world. Now Cyrenius knows everything, so turn to him. He will tell you what was there, for he saw it all." With that, Moronius had to be satisfied, and with him several other curious inquirers. Thereupon the little child requested that Joseph, Cyrenius, Jonathan, and his James come along with him to the scene of the fire, which here and there still gave off wisps of smoke. When they arrived there, the little child ran 3 times around the large fire area, took a half-burned dagger, gave it to Cyrenius, and stated, "Cyrenius, see, now your enemies are defeated, and their strength is turned to ashes. Here in my hand is the last hostile remnant, and it has become useless. I give it to you as a token that henceforth you shall take no revenge against those who were against you, and the few who still are. For as useless and reduced to slag as this dagger shall also be your anger, as well as that of your few remaining enemies. These your enemies went forth from Tyre, and wanted to destroy you here. Now I knew the day and the hour and the moment that you were in danger. Therefore I had a storm come at the right time last night, which drove the wild animals down from the hills, and caused great fear and terror among the assassins, so that they became helpless when they were attacked by the beasts. And behold, thus it will be one day in the future. A mighty fire from above will come over the bones of all the doers of evil, and will devour them to dust and ashes. Then will the Lord pass 3 times around the scene of the world's conflagration. And no one will ask him and say, "Lord, what are you doing?" And only at the 3rd time around shall the last ray of anger be taken from the earth. At these words all were wide-eyed, for no one understood their meaning. Chapter 211. The child warns Joseph against vain searching. After a while, Joseph went over to the little child and asked him how such was to be understood. And the little child replied, "Joseph, here you seek in vain, for there are many things indeed, which will not be disclosed to you while you live on the earth. But whoever after this life will enter into my kingdom spiritually, to him everything will be shown in the light. So do not ask about things here that do not concern you at this time. Now have soil brought over so this fire area may be covered with it. Here Joseph turned to Cyrenius, who promptly had soil brought over by his servants, and the area of the fire covered therewith. By the time this was done, it was noon, and the midday meal already stood prepared by the sons of Joseph, who kept it in readiness for the many guests. The little child now said to Joseph, "I have already become quite hungry. 3 large fish are fried, so let us go to dinner." Here Joseph said, "That is a good idea. But will the fish really be sufficient for more than 100 people?" The little child answered, "You have surely seen the great creatures. How then can you ask? Each fish weighs a good 100 pounds, so there really is no need of any more, and there is enough for 200 people. So let us go home now, for I am already very hungry, and especially for the good fish of the Mediterranean." Thereupon Joseph promptly called everyone to the noon meal and went inside the villa. On the way to the villa, Cyrenius asked the lovely little child whether this sea really was a sea in the middle of the land, Mare Mediterraneum. And the little child replied, "Whether right or not, I must of course speak with all of you according to your kind if I want to be understood by you. After the meal, you can look it up on the little earth globe, and there you will undoubtedly find out whether this expression fits." The little child now ran ahead with his James to be at the table as soon as possible. When Joseph arrived, the little child smiled at him from the table while already holding a piece of fish in his hand. Joseph was secretly quite happy at this, but said, for the sake of propriety, "Well, well, my dearest little child, such a big piece. Will you really be able to eat it all?" And the little child smiled still more and answered, "Do not worry about that, for your fathers have already seen to it that nothing can easily harm my stomach, for they have often served me with the largest and worst scraps." Here Joseph well understood what the little child meant. Chapter 212. The child and James forget to pray. Joseph now said his usual table prayer and blessed the food, then asked the little child if he had also prayed. Here the little child smiled again and said to James, "Say, now we are going to catch it, for we have both forgotten to ask the blessing and to give thanks, and have already eaten of the fish. You speak now as well as you can, otherwise we are sure to be punished again and will have to fast a bit." And James, somewhat embarrassed, answered, "Dear Father Joseph, I ask your forgiveness, for this time, along with my Jesus, I have really forgotten to pray." When Joseph heard this from James, his face took on a somewhat threatening look, and he stated, "Since you have forgotten to pray, you can also forget to eat until evening, and in the meantime you can go for a little walk out in the open." At this, the little child smiled at James and said, "Well, there we have it. Did I not say a little while ago that we would have to fast? But wait just a little longer. I want to speak a few words with Joseph first. Perhaps he will relent a bit as concerns the fasting until evening." And James said in a low tone of voice, "Lord, you do what seems best to you, and I shall follow your example." Thereupon the little child asked, "Joseph, are you really serious about that?" And Joseph replied, "Yes, of course. For whoever does not pray, he shall not eat either." At this the little child smiled once more and said, "Now that is what I call being strict. See, if I were as strict as you are now, a great many who still eat today, although they did not pray, would have to do penance by fasting. I really would like to hear from you, for once, why, and exactly to whom, I should pray. And then I would also like to find out from you just exactly to whom you pray in your prayer, and to whom poor James should have prayed." Here Joseph replied, "To the Lord God, your holy Father, must you pray, since he is holy, most holy." And the little child retorted, "You are certainly correct there, but the unfortunate part of the matter is that you just do not know the Father of all glory to whom you pray. And you will not recognize this Father for a long time because your old, habitual blindness hinders you therein." The little child then said to James, "Let us go outside now, and you will see that out in the open one can also get something to eat without prayer." Hereupon the little child went outside with his James and did not allow himself to be detained. Chapter 213. Joseph repents his mistake. When the little child and James were outside, Mary said to Joseph, "Listen, my dear husband and father Joseph, sometimes you are really a bit too strict towards the divine child. What could one otherwise expect of a normal child aged 2 1/3 years? Who would subject him to such stern discipline? But you are as strict in your discipline against the child of all children as if he were of a heaven only knows ripe age. See, that seems very unreasonable to me. Even though you love him beyond measure, now and then, you are sometimes so strict with him as if you had no love towards him at all." This tone of Mary immediately found an echo in Cyrenius, Jonathan, Tullia, Eudokia, and Moronius Pillar. And Cyrenius, in addition, protested to Joseph, "Friend, sometimes I really do not know what to make of you. First you teach me to recognize the most high deity in the little child himself, right after which you again demand of the little child that he should worship a god. Tell me, how does that harmonize? If the little child is the divine being himself, how then should he pray to a god? Does your demand not seem a bit absurd to you? I will make the supposition the little child were not what I now quite without question recognize him to be, and always worship him as such. Then I would say that coming from a true friend of children, your request seems a bit foolish, for who will demand a serious prayer of a child 9/4 years old? For that reason you will surely see my point of view when I, as a pagan, say to you, "Friend, you must be struck with a threefold blindness. if you are not always able to esteem the little child at his true worth. Truly, this time I certainly will not eat a bite if the little child with his James will not be present here at my side. Is it not even ridiculous if you entreat the Lord God for a blessing upon the food, and then order the same Lord and God away from the table, because he did not pray according to your habitual manner? That is surely why the little child also asked you, just to whom he should pray, and to whom you pray, and also to whom James should have prayed. But as I see it, you do not seem to have noticed what the little child wanted to tell you therewith. These quite to-the-point remarks went straight to Joseph's heart, and he went outside to get the little child as well as James. But there he called James and the little child in vain, for both had quickly gone away, to where no one knew.